Hey guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. I'm back here with you with another scrapping video, and in this series of videos I'm actually doing my own spin on it, because there's lots of videos out there on scrapping things, and we've got a stack of DVD players here. Now my slant is basically giving you options, just showing what's the best way to get a return, so you can make up your own mind whether they're worth picking up if you're out street scrapping or if you run a bit of an e-waste business. Give you an idea of where, if any, there is some value. So these DVD players have come through the e-waste. None of them have remote controls, and I sell them, and that's the first option with any scrapping job, is if the thing works, consider selling it first, because you'll get way more value than you will for scrap. With these DVD style players, we've got some well-known brands: TIAC, Toshiba, Sony. The top one's a Highlander. I haven't heard of that one. But with any of these, if they've got the remote, if they're nice and clean and they work well, I only get about $10 for them in the shop. It's difficult for most of you to sell these because they're really not worth eBaying. By the time you factor postage in, it pretty well outprices what the things are worth. So first option for me, if they're clean with the remote, I'll get $10 for them. If they're not, and as these ones are, no remotes, I don't know if they work, and it's really not worth the time to test them. So first option is just to throw them all in the dirty shred or dirty pressing steel. And what we'll do though is we'll cut the cords off first, just like that. Cords are all cut off. I've cut the plugs off the other end. So scrappers will certainly know that the insulated wire is good cash. It adds up quick. There's always a lot of weight when you get a big barrel full of that. And to give you guys who don't scrap much an idea of the value, that looks like it's about 200 grams. And insulated copper wire at the moment is paying over $2 a kilo. I think it's about $2.30 or $2.40. Let's just work on 2, and at 200 grams, that's a fifth, so that's 40 cents. We could probably make that 50 cents because it is well over 2. So I'll write that on the notepad. Alright, so a notepad for all the options. First option, remember, is to try and sell. And as I said, I get $10 and can get up to 20 for a really nice unit. So keep that in mind, because you'll get way better to sell the thing, even if you get $5 than what the scrap value is, as you'll see as we go through this video. So you may not have a shop, but you could always try on your local Facebook buy, swap and sell page. You could have a garage sale. If you're going to a market, you know, you might get $5 to $10. So second option is the insulated wire and dirty shred steel. Dirty steel. So very little work for this second option, and quite often this is the best option, and that's why I'm going through these videos to show you where the easiest dollars are. Insulated wire, we said about 50 cents. And the dirty steel, we'll weigh them up and see how they weigh. Alright, I've thrown the plugs on top there as well, because with the dirty steel, most scrap yards will take quite a bit of rubbish, and the plugs do have brass pins, which we'll talk about in a tick. So the 4 of them with the plugs weigh 7 kilos, and 7 kilos at the moment, it's a bit over 10 cents a kilo. So let's go 70 cents. So that's the quickest option for scrapping DVDs, is $1.20 for 4 of them, remember. So not much value in them at all. You can see why it's easier to get $5 per item. Well, not so much easier, but it's certainly better value, assuming they work, of course. Alright, so our next option will involve scrapping out a bit. Now these things are pretty easy to scrap out. You really just have screws on each end, and there's a few along the back for the cover. You've also got a few in between the input and output sockets. So we'll just quickly get all those out, and I'll go through all 4 and take the covers off, and we'll check back in and see how long it's taken me. So it only took 5 minutes to take the covers off, and I removed all the screws from the back panel. A couple of them had screws from underneath as well, but the cheaper ones didn't. Now you can see that there's a reasonably good board in these, although it's quite small, and a power board the other side. The cheaper they are, the smaller the main board tends to get. And we're kind of graduating down. That one's actually still got a disc in it. But have a look at this last one. This is the Highlander, and really tiny main board. Mostly just empty space, really. Small power board as well. So there's not much value in those. Usually, and it's a good rule of thumb, the better quality and you know the well-known good quality brands usually have better boards in them. Alright, so that took about 5 minutes, only a whisker over, wasn't quite 6. So really quick and easy to do, and that's the only saving grace from DVDs for scrapping them. They're actually quite fun because you can get into them very quickly. We've got the 4 covers that are nice clean steel, and I just stand on those and it flattens them out. And I've got a small tub of hardware. So the next stage, and I'll keep an eye on my times again, is we'll just whip the boards out and the front panels off, the DVD mechanisms, and we'll be left with an empty steel case. So we'll get to that now. Now just a point when you're scrapping out electronics, mid-grade boards pay quite well, but you do need to remove the plugs. So wiring like these with the plugs, they need to be unplugged. The ribbon ones just pull out anyway, so that's easy, because they don't want dead weight on those as far as plugs go. Whereas the power boards, because they're really no value anyway, and I'm sending them back out to the transfer station, we don't need to remove the plugs, we can just chop the wires off. So that's got all those apart, and around about 15 minutes, so 20 minutes total to get to this stage. Remembering that's 4 DVDs. So all the steel casings, as I said, I just put them on the ground and stood on them, and they all fold nice and flat. And that's nice clean steel now, just over 4 kilos. We'll work on 20 cents a kilo for clean steel, which is going to be 80 cents. Now our insulated wire, we had 50 cents before, and now we've also added this lot to it. I'm not going to worry about this very fine ribbon wire. I have a bag that it goes in for low grade wire, which is the same bag you'd put Christmas lights and coaxial cable and that sort of stuff. It does pay, it doesn't take up a lot of space, but that little bit's not worth weighing up. So we'll weigh all the insulated wire together now, and it hasn't added much, it's added another 100 grams, so 300 grams of insulated wire would take us to, I'd say 65 would be a reasonable approximation. Now, what do we have left? Well, we have a tub full of hardware, and you all know that I saved that, but there's really not much value to the average scrapper in that. We have a small tub of just plastic bits and pieces and some plugs and things, which is pretty much just rubbish, although you can throw the plugs in with your low grade, with your dirty pressing steel if you've got that. The power boards, I've discussed them before in other videos, and I don't save them because they're low value, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. We'll just weigh them up. All the DVD drive mechanisms, which still have some metal in them, they still have small electric motors. I tend to pull them apart sometimes when I'm just after an easy no-think tinkering job. Generally, there's very little value in them for most people, and they could probably just, don't know that you'd get away with them in dirty steel because there's really hardly any steel in them. Some of them have a bit more than others. You can see that one you could possibly get away with, but they are mostly plastic. But for this stage of the scrap out, we could include those with the front panels, which again are mostly plastic, and that could all just go back to the e-waste transfer station. No value, but you know, it's free to get rid of, and it doesn't go into the rubbish system. And likewise the power boards, I send them out, although we could pinch a few of the transformers off. So we might look at that in the next stage where we micro scrap a bit more. At this stage, I'm not allowing any value for any of that. They can all go back to the transfer station. And if you're that way inclined, you could also throw the plugs in there too, because they all will be allowed in the e-waste at the transfer station. So the only other value we've got is these mid-grade boards, so we'll weigh these ones up. and they don't amount to a lot of weight. We're looking at around about just over 300 grams, so about a third of a kilo. The latest price I had on mid-grade boards was about $1.40 a kilo, so we'll estimate that to be what, about say 45 cents. So I'll add that to the list. Mid-grade boards. And for those of you who don't do much with this sort of stuff, the mid-grade boards pay better because of precious metal recovery, and you're getting that mostly out of, what do we say, let's say 40. You're getting precious metal recovery like gold and silver and palladium and other things out of these chips mainly. There's also silver in some of these crystal oscillators. There's a few of those around. But there's quite a lot of chips and things on these boards. The bigger one underneath was quite a nice board. A lot of capacitors as well. They're no value. So what we're looking for a mid-grade board is not a lot of junk. These have got a few fittings on the back, but because there's quite a lot of chips here, flat packs, and this one's actually a removable chip, which I might even pop out because it won't make much difference to the weight or value of the board. So that's where we're looking at on the boards. There's nothing much on the backs of them, but they make mid-grade boards, so they're certainly worth saving in my view, as opposed to the low-grade boards that aren't. And we were going to weigh those up and just show you what they're worth. So this lot here, we were reckoning around about 40 cents for those few. And here we go. Even though they weigh a fair bit for their size, it's mainly due to the copper coils and transformers. Their value per kilo is so low that it's not worth it. We're looking around about the same weight as the mid-grade board, so that's an interesting comparison. We had 40 cents for the mid-grade boards. These lot work out at about 5 cents. So I think they're only paying around 20 cents a kilo. And it's worth taking the bigger transformers off, and even the copper coils, because they're going to pay 50 to 60 cents a kilo rather than, you know, about 20. So that's what I generally do, and we'll look at that in the next option. We'll just microscrap a little bit more, as I've mentioned. And anyway, so that's the reason I don't save them. About 5 to 6 cents or something there. They can go back down. As far as this option goes, they can go to the transfer station. Alright, so that's the only value we had here. What does that add up to? 5, 18, $1.85. So we haven't really gained a lot from our first stage. You can see that we've spent 20 minutes gaining really only about 65 cents. So that gives you some good information to weigh up if it's worthwhile. Remembering we're talking of 4 DVDs here to get those values. And let's look at what some people like to do, scrap them a little bit further out. Next and final stage on this job is some micro scrapping. It's certainly not worth it economically, as I show in most of these videos, but many of us like to pull things apart, and at times, sometimes you like a little job that you don't really have to think too much about, and it's fun saving up all the bits. So we'll go through it anyway. First step is I'm going to take the transformers off these power boards, and then what's left, I might pull a couple of the little chips off, but I'm not going to weigh up the chips, they won't weigh enough. So we'll pull what we can off there, and the rest can definitely go to the e-waste transfer station. And we're not really going to worry about micro scrapping out these front panels and control boards. There's really no value. I did flick the flat pack off one of the boards there, and there was a chip on the other one. I've flicked that off. But really, there's not a lot of point in... Oh, there's another little chip there. But there's not a lot of point in taking anything off there, because this lot can go out to the e-waste transfer station as e-waste. The moment I start pulling the boards off, which I'm not saving anyway because they're low value, there's nothing any good on them. But the moment I took all the boards off, then the plastic pieces really shouldn't go into the e-waste bins, because they're actually just rubbish unless you clean up all little bits and try them, put them through your recycle bin. So not worth any time on that sort of stuff other than flicking a couple of the chips off. The drives themselves, generally speaking, most scrappers probably should do the same. Probably just should put them into the e-waste stream, because there's really not much value as far as precious metal recovery. We've got all the wire off it. There's only a little bit of wire. The electric motors are so tiny they won't add up to very much, but I will micro scrap these out because there's a few other things I save. The plastic cogs I do save, these steel sliding rods that the carriage slides on, I actually save those as well. I get a few grommets and stuff out of them as well. So we'll micro scrap those, but I don't expect to really add much value to our job lot at all. And the last thing was our plugs. I did mention about taking the pins off. We'll do that as well. And look, I expect we'd hardly add any value to our deal by doing this, but some people like the micro scrapping, so we'll hop to that shortly, and I'll keep an eye on my time. Now the transformers come off pretty easy. Some like to use big multi-grips like these and just lever them off. It tends to break things. Doesn't really matter because it's strap anyway. So there we go, that's got it. It's got lots of copper wire in that. Other times it's just as easy to get a screwdriver and just lever up under them. This is only a little coil in here, but they usually pop off quite well with a screwdriver. So that's all we want off that board. Alright, so I've jumped inside now. It's pouring rain outside and it's only about 8 degrees Celsius, so not scrapping outside. Thought I'd come in on the bench here where it's nice and warm. And I've jumped ahead a little bit on the scrapping. I finished getting the transformers off those boards and some coils, and now I've got a heap of little electric motors to go in there as well that came out of these CD or DVD drives. So we've scrapped them out, and this is what we've got. Now it took me another 20 minutes or so to do these four. We've added a few cents in clean steel, so I won't worry about writing that down. A few little bits of boards and connectors that'll just go with the rest of the e-waste. Now these DVD readers, I haven't found any information out about whether they're worth saving or whether there's any precious metals in them. So if you know, let me know. Put a comment down and see, if we can find out if there's anything good in them or whether they're worth micro scrapping out further. But I doubt it, so they'll be just going to the e-waste as well. We got a little bit more wire, very fine wire, so no real value there. We've got a few little magnets, and I keep the little magnets because I can actually sell them in the shop. They're kind of natty, they're all different sizes, and they're on the top tray that sort of holds the disc in place. So they're worth something to me. Got a big pile of ABS plastic, that's all clean plastic, so no contaminations, that'll go in the recycle bin. A little bit more hardware, which adds up. And along the hardware lines we've got a few more springs. I'll keep springs separate because they sell very well. And all these rubber grommets, I keep them as well. I'm always looking for one of those for doing a job or something, but I'll fill up a jar with them and I'll get $5 for those in the shop. A couple of switches I did pull off the front panels. They're a universal type switch, and I've actually replaced switches like this in stereos before. So I do keep a few of those spare. But likewise, I can also throw them in a little box and sell them. The plugs we'll get to in a tick. Plastic sprockets and gears, a jar full of them I get $5 for. These little shafts, I said I keep those. Hobbyists like that sort of stuff, so we'll save that. A few little bits of brass, but we'll add to the brass when we pull those pins off the plugs. And some flat packs and chips I just pulled off. I'm not going to worry about writing anything down for them. We're talking sort of fractions of cents. A little bit more plastic, just little bits of plastic that aren't recyclable, or they're too small to be recyclable, so that's a little bit of rubbish. Now our transformers has been boosted by the electric motors, as I said, and that weighs out at 360 odd grams. If the price of transformers is around about 50 to 60 cents a kilo, we're going to be looking at about 20 cents worth there. So we will add the 20 cents to our list. But there's really not much extra value. And I do need to know, I underestimated a little bit with our wire before. It worked out a little bit more. So if we made that 80 cents, we've then rounded that up to $2. So that was the value for that part of the scrap. Now with this next section, we have prices as above. We've still got our $2 for all this stuff. and we can add about 20 cents for our transformers and electric motors and coils. Just on that though, there are some people that like to pull these apart. These sort actually do unwind very easily, and I've got a few larger ones put aside, and when I get 10 of them, I'm actually going to do a video on that and just see, you know, to what stage you can get value for your time on those. The electric motors, certainly, they're so light, they're so small, the copper wire in them is going to be extremely fine, certainly not worth your while. And same with these transformers, because they're all encased in plastic, and then even between the layers of wire you've got layers of insulation. Way too much work. The only ones that are even remotely easy to get apart are these coils, because there's no layers of insulation between the copper wire. But look, we're just leaving those like that. I'm not going to take this micro scrapping on this particular video any further. Now, we've added a little bit of value in those electric motors mainly. The hardware, most of you won't get any extra value out of it, but all these things I just went through are worth a little bit to me, and it's going to add up actually. I'm going to estimate $1. It's really hard to put a figure on it, and I'm not going to kind of work them all out on a weight basis or anything like that. But, you know, that just gives us a little bit of extra value. The only other thing is the brass. We'll take some pins out of these plugs, but there's not going to be much weight in brass either. We may as well do it to show you how much is there. Now, as for these plugs, there's a number of ways of doing this. You can use some big multi-grip pliers and then some smaller ones, and you can kind of just lever the whole pin out. They usually lever out okay, but it is a bit of a mucking around exercise, and things slip, and sometimes you clunk your hand and take skin off and that sort of stuff. So you can see it also sometimes pulls out the wire. So that's one way of doing it. It does take a fair bit of effort, and I find if I'm doing a lot of them, it actually hurts my wrist, and then you still got to clean them up a bit. So I don't worry about doing them that way. Another way is you can also jam these in a vise and then do a similar levering on the top, and same sort of result. And it is a bit tough on your wrist and hands after a while. The easiest way I find is, you don't get all the brass, but it's the quickest and easiest, is just use some cutters and twist, and they normally break off pretty easily, and you're getting the bulk of the brass, and they're easier to clean up because usually the twisting motion takes most of that black plastic off. So that's all we're going to do with these few. I don't normally worry, but we'll see how much weight we get out of the brass for the interests of calculations on these DVD players. So as you can see, very little weight from these little bits of brass, the pins and the couple other bits we found. That's just over 10 grams. It looks like it's about 13 or 14 grams. But at 10 grams, brass has been paying pretty well lately, about $5 a kilo. But that means we're only looking at about 5 cents. So to my mind, it's certainly not worth taking the pins out of plugs. And I did a video on it once showing the economics of it. And I'll put the link up the top now if you want to go and have a look at that. Anyway, we've added a little bit of extra value for brass, but you know what, I'm not even going to write it down. So we've got quite a lot of things that we're just adding a few cents here and there, but it really goes to show, especially for scrappers that don't have much use for any extra hardware bits and pieces, or if they don't do repair work. And you know, the switches are valuable for me because it's handy stock when I'm doing repairs. So really all we've added in scrap value is another 20 cents. And remember that that option was about 20 minutes extra. So certainly not worthwhile, but it's nice to show you the micro scrapping process, and you guys can make up your own minds. This first stage also actually took us about 20 minutes. So that gave us almost double the value. We almost doubled from the initial chop the wire off and throw the whole lot in dirty steel. But you know, $1 for 20 minutes, probably not worth it, unless you've got a use for some of the stuff, as I've said, or unless you've got lots of time on your hands and you just like pulling things apart. So there we go. To sum up on this deal, DVDs, should you pick them up off street scrapping? or if you get them in the e-waste, well, yes, they're easy to pull apart to the first stage. You know, even if you perhaps don't do all of this and you just take the mid-grade boards out and then you still throw what's left in the dirty steel, it just depends what you're after. If you're after IC chips and that sort of stuff for precious metal recovery and you're saving them up rather than selling them, then that's fine. Everyone's got to make up their own decisions based on what they want to get out of it. But as far as economics go, by far the best option is to sell the things if they work. And remember, that was just for one. So for 4, we're looking at $40 to $80 range. So by far the best option. But if they don't go, this is the quickest, easiest, virtually no labour. You're just cutting the cord off and you're throwing the rest in dirty shred, and you're getting $1 for your time, basically. So there you go. Hope you got something out of that. I like to present options and then people can make up their own minds. If you want me to scrap out or do this sort of summary on anything else in particular, leave me a note or send me a message, or go and have a look at my Facebook page called The Ultimate Recycler, and you can contact me there, and we'll do some more videos. Just as I mentioned with the hardware, here's some of the jars I've nearly got ready for sale, with the springs and the rubber grommets and those little rod things out of the DVDs, and the sprockets, plastic gears and things, and general hardware. I sell lots of those through the shop. Hobbyists and inventors and farmers and anyone that does tinkering in the shed just, you know, loves a bit of assortment, hardware assortments, just to, you know, you find a little clip to finish a job, or a rubber grommet where a cord goes through. Springs, as I said, springs are always popular. So there you go. That's what I do with that stuff. I'll no doubt refer to it in future videos again, because I never know if this is the first video of mine you're watching. And just before I go, one last thing. Remember this DVD we got out of one of the players? I Love You Man. I don't know, I presume it's a movie. Can't say I've seen it, but I'm not going to worry about watching it. What I do with all these DVDs and CDs and everything is I stack them up. Look at this. This is an old lamp base. We'll just drop this over the top. Slides down with the others. I don't know how many are there. I haven't tried to count them or estimate. I'm just going to keep stacking them up. And I have plans down the track of making some sort of lamp, some sort of floor lamp out of those. So, not sure how I'm going to do it yet, but if you stay tuned to my channel, you'll see it eventually. Okay, catch you in the next video.